Welcome to Talking Impact, your go-to podcast for exploring the powerful connection between mental health, education, and resilient youth. Join us as we uncover insights and stories that inspire classrooms, stronger minds, brighter futures, and a lasting impact in our society. Welcome to another amazing episode of Talking Impact. I'm joined today with Robert Lemermeyer, who's been on our show before and has been working with Impact Society, doing Peak Week and mountaineering and photography for many, many years. But also we're here with Jill Wheatley, who is an amazing, inspired athlete, lifelong teacher, someone who has gone through the depths and come back not just to climb some of the highest mountains in the world on her way to doing 13 massives, but is sharing her story with us, with schools, with students, to continue that passion to inspire young people to find the light in darkness, to find an opportunity to have hope despite circumstances, and as a result, become a hero. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome, Robert, and welcome, Jill.
Thank you. Much. Great to be here.
Yeah.
Robert, we'll start with you though, because you're here today to kind of play a dual role, to continue to share your story of the work that you've done with Impact Society as a mountaineer, photographer, and philanthropist, but also to introduce us to a friend that you made along the way to continue to ignite purpose through mountaineering and adventure and resilience. Can you bring us up to speed? We had an episode a few weeks ago that was released on our podcast talking about your life story, your passion for the mountains and photography and art, but also to make meaning out of your purpose. And Peak Week has been something that now we've done 2 years of, which is pretty exciting. But Rob, maybe bring us up to speed on where things are at with Peak Week and Impact Society and how it went this year, and then we'll get into to know Jill here.
Sounds good. Thanks, Chris, and thanks, Jill, for being here. Well, Peak Week is complete this year. It was a success. We raised money, but I thought beyond that, the friendships that I made, including Jill, have been incredible. Like I met like 3 lifelong friends this time, and I wasn't seeking that, but that happened. The adventure was incredible. The mountains are amazing. I mean, I can go on and on about it. I have big plans for next year. Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
Almost 1,000 heroes were paid for through the fundraising. Over $30,000 people raised, and then over 2 years, almost 50, or just over 50 over just over a year and a bit. Yeah. So I mean, it's been successful that way. Yeah. It's very rewarding experience, and it's just opened doors to so many other things that I want to do, and do with you guys and do with the young people. And the mountains continue to lead me in all kinds of magical ways that I never expected. And believe me, I've opened my heart to it, my whole soul to it. And like then I meet Jill, and it's like another key. And it's like, I don't know. I'm overwhelmed. Yeah. Well, there was also the documentary from last year's Peak Week that was produced at the Bow Valley, was debuting at the Bow Valley Film Festival, where this friendship began, right? Maybe tell us a little bit about that part of the journey and how beautiful it was to kind of see it all come together, but then also be standing alongside some giants in the mountaineering industry who are also on a similar path. Yeah,
it was super intimidating. Ryan did this documentary last year about Peak Week just to document it, to show people, and it got some legs. And then a local filmmaker saw it, loved it, liked my story, kind of got a kick out of my energy, and then at the debut, I'm there with all these mountaineers and all these big shots in camera, and Jill was there. And I'm like, look, I was like, Jill looks pretty cool. And like, I didn't really know. I was super intimidated, but they really welcomed us into that community. So my film ran alongside Jill's after hers. So all our stories kind of dovetailed together, and all the similarities. And I didn't expect it. I just met all these great people and just felt really accepted by the mountain community, which I didn't expect. I kind of felt like an outsider, the city boy coming in with all his big ideas. I felt really at home. Yeah.
So what inspired you to connect with Jill? Tell us about that.
Well, her story. I mean, her story and just her energy and just this, what she gives off. I just find myself drawn to it. And I've been trying to figure out why, but do I need to know why? We always want to know why everything, humans, but authenticity, as Jill talks about, is we're drawn to authenticity. And to someone that's gone through something similar to what I've gone through, although 10 times to the power of 10 harder, is really inspiring. And Jill inspires me to take the steps that I didn't think I even needed to take. That I'm just at the beginning of this journey, and then seeing what Jill's gone through. Yeah, life's wonderful and magical, and the mountains are particularly wonderful. Yeah, I'm sure if that answers the question, Chris.
No, it does. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the three of us are here because we're all fellow travelers on a journey of purpose to not just find our own purpose. And, we do have that habit of trying to make meaning out of everything, but also to know that when we have common thread and a common purpose, it's not that complicated. It's doing what we love to do, using our strengths, using our own stories to not just better ourselves, but to make a dent in this universe for the better, to inspire the next generation, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think the word that's coming to mind as I listen to you, or two words, the story, but also serendipity. I started sharing my story in the gym in Canmore because I broke my leg and ankle, and I kept seeing Dan, who also had a film in the tour, and as he asked, he was politely curious about seeing me in there training every day, and then we got talking about my sunglasses, etc. But because I opened up and shared my story just a little bit, and his curiosity, like sharing that little bit of my story, he said, I need you need to talk to Sue, the coordinator of the Bow Valley Film Tour. And so by just starting to share my story a little bit, it made this serendipitous connection. And 3 days later, I had put my story, condensed it into 10 minutes. So I could be, and I felt so welcome, incredibly welcome in the Bow Valley community, but also with the filmmakers. I'm just such an amateur. I was literally using my phone and my paper and pencil to scribe my story in such a way that I hope that I could connect by being authentic, by being vulnerable, sharing my story, and then less than a week later, it was on the big screen, and that's where I was introduced to Peak Week and the Impact Society, and I was the first one each time, I think, asking the questions, like, tell me more. As a former educator, although I was at one time technically a teacher, I see myself now as a teacher about who shines, uses the mountains as my classroom. And I teach about the power of perspective and possibility. And I think Peak Week really connects to that. Things that you mentioned you didn't think once were possible, and where you have found inspiration in the mountains. There's just connection, and our stories certainly have come together with ease and mutual inspiration.
Why don't we get into the story?
Yeah, we definitely.
Sorry.
Well, no, and we got it. Jill, tell me. I know your story is really incredible, and it is multi layers to it. But give us the Coles Notes if you can, or walk back to living in Germany, or anywhere.
Sure. So as I briefly mentioned there, I was a teacher, and my sense of adventure, you had mentioned something earlier, Chris, about, travelers and seeking adventure. And after college, I just had this desire to see the world. And so I was able to combine my passion for traveling and adventure with actually moving overseas and teaching in different countries. So fast forward, I ended up in Germany. I was teaching at an international school where kids from all over the world are brought together. Their parents may be international athletes, bankers, lawyers, diplomats, but we come together, and through English is the language of instruction. And so I was teaching high school phys ed just like I would in a high school here in Alberta or anywhere else in Canada, with probably 21 students. And on a September morning that started on a day just like any other, having grown up in Canada, in Northern Ontario, I was very much, even though the hovering clouds, let's put on our Gore-Tex, that we're not going to melt. I'd so much rather be outside, learning along with Mother Nature in her presence than being in a loud gymnasium. Anyway, in the fraction of a second, my life changed. Impact. When a hard ball hit my head, and I was taken to hospital, my right eye actually closed on impact and blew up like the size of a baseball. In fact, this color reminds me a little bit of the color of my eye at the time. And I was taken to hospital, and I knew what my name was. I think That I'm not even sure if that's the question they asked me. You know, the common concussion. You know, where I was or what day it was. I don't even remember now. But I passed, and they sent me home, and I lived in a very typical Bavarian loft. So sheep and shovels, cows below me, and alone. And my colleagues dropped me off, and it was just, you know, go home and rest. And that weekend I had been training for the World Duathlon Championships, long distance. So I was heading to Switzerland that weekend to compete. And I thought, it's just a black eye. Of course you can. Like, toughen up, Wheatley.
Just suck
Like,
it
that's
up.
what, yeah, literally. I could hear like former coaches or my dad, like, just be tough. And so then about a day and a half later, my friend came. He had flown in from the UK. He was going to bring me to that race in Switzerland, but he found me basically listless. So in and out of consciousness over those 36 hours, more of like 2 days. And I had a bag of frozen berries. So I was like in a loft. I didn't have a proper fridge. I just had a small like bar fridge. So no ice, but I had frozen berries for my smoothies. And I had tried to use that, I guess, as ice on my head to soothe what felt like being in a washing machine. I remember that, like just the pulsating of my head. And I couldn't get myself to the toilet to be sick. When the nausea came on, and I was trying to use that as vomit. Anyway, that's the way he found me. Wow. He brought me back to that hospital. They put me in an ambulance. I have a little bit of recollection of being in a stretcher, but it's from like an eagle, like a bird's eye view. I have these memories of even the accident itself. Body. Totally. Wow. Yeah. And so I was put in an ambulance and taken to a neurotrauma hospital, where essentially the next 4 months were sort of like quite intensive care. So my black eye has in fact never reopened. And my left eye, I see clearly out of the sort of the bottom part. So they actually ended up putting a number on it. Like basically I've lost 70% of my eyesight. So if you cover your right eye, the top of your left, I kind of see this bottom. That's how I tried to sort of humanize it or allow others to see what I see. But with a brain injury, as we are unique in ourselves, every brain injury is so unique. Yeah. And so when I was initially in hospital, and German isn't my native language, I was wondering if things were lost in translation, because the focus, when they realized that my skull was actually like on the impact, so my skull was fractured, my brain was bleeding and swelling, they focused on that and said, once that blood, so the blood of my brain was bleeding and the bruising just kept going across my face. And then when they were focused on controlling that, you know, are they going to have to operate? Are they going to have to go in to relieve some of the tension? My eye is going to be okay. It's just the blood, once it clears, it'll be fine. Focus on the brain. 2 more weeks. 2 more weeks. And with every push of those goalposts, it was like my hope dwindle. In fact, I remember a doctor, one of the neuro, head of the department, I used the word dwindle as in referring to my hope, and the translation didn't quite, wasn't seamless. So I tried to explain to him what that mean. Like, I am losing everything I have to continue in this life. He was asking about purpose. I have no purpose. If I can't see, I can't do the things that I used to be able to do, that loss of autonomy, the stigma that society puts on us, the labels, like your podcast where your colleague was referring to with the stickers of all the labels. If you hear traumatic brain injury, or you hear vision loss, an eating disorder, you know, TBI, it's like suddenly people think, well, if they're visually impaired, they can't do this, they can't do that. Brain injury, dare I use the word, like stupid, like honestly. And so all of these labels, it was just like, I want no part of this. And I just kept getting like all of the complications where I was incredibly ill. And as I mentioned in the video, like less than the weight of my parents' Labrador, like 63 pounds, like that's 3 days to live if they unhooked me from the machines. And I didn't want to because of those labels. And I thought I can't drive anymore. I was just so focused on the losses. The loss of the eyesight, the loss of independence, the loss of my driver's license, like so many things. I had had the typical Subaru with the road bike, mountain bike, backcountry skis, on-piste skis, snowshoes, anything, depending on the weather. Oh, I'll go here, I'll go there. Maybe I'll go to Switzerland this weekend. Maybe I'll stay in Germany. Like, it was all taken away.
Living the dream.
Totally.
And then it collapsed.
And then in a fraction of a second, our teachers, our parents, they say, like, you never know, life might change in a second. Life can change in a second. You can relate to that.
Absolutely.
Like our life, like it feels like a story made for the movies. And I'm living it. And every single day, like under this jacket, I have goosebumps. I can pinch myself every single day. Like, is this real? Like looking down, like when we talk about, you know, the pivot or the TSM turning point, and I think about those days in hospital where the doctor said, like, we, you know, court order, we have power, all of the decisions for your medical, like, it's up to us. That was taken away from me. I lost my autonomy. Like, my brother was given power of attorney. I had nothing. And so, there was no hope. And I could see. So from one hospital to the next, dealing with all of the different complications, I just felt I was being tossed because nobody knew what to do with me. I felt like a number, like literally an insurance number this long, rather than like a human being. And I didn't have that connection that I feel right now is so necessary, like to keep hope, to keep, you know, and purpose. So after 26 months, it was 26 months in 7 hospitals in 3 countries. But it was while I was in Colorado, sort of the last 7 months, that I would, with the little vision that I have, I could see out to the Rockies. And I remember Dr. Smith saying to me, like, when I was defiant, I remember breaking a pencil and a ruler and throwing like a charger that I had. The most inappropriate language. But like, what are you gonna do, Jill? And I'd be like, I'm gonna go out in those mountains. Like, I'll figure it out. That's exactly what I said. I'll figure it out. And only now, like years later, did I put that connection together that I actually went to the mountains, found healing. But that's because I felt so incredibly lost. Like I couldn't live in Germany anymore because my residency permit was dependent on my job. I couldn't do my job anymore because I didn't have the physical ability to do the job. All of these things were taken away. And then when I actually was discharged in December 2016, I felt a breath of fresh air, like finally on my own. Because for so long, like I had to have one-to-one, like a belt. Like if she falls, like I couldn't go to the toilet by myself. Showers not allowed. And then, so I was so thankful, relieved to get out, but then I was so lost. It was like, I don't want to be in that clinical setting, but now what? Like, I don't have family. Like, there's the assumption you're going to go and stay with family, and not everybody is like in that, has that home situation. Yeah. You know, like your students, we don't know what they're going home to.
If we're going to be able to make it
exactly.
through. Yeah.
Like they're expecting, oh, you're going to go and you're going to check in with your family doctor every 2 weeks. I don't have a home. Like I do not have. And I just, again, coming back to feeling like a number, like not having that, a team or a community at that time. And so what I did is I chose mountains in search of light. Essentially, I thought if I spend 1 year, and I do this, like going around the globe, 13 different massifs around the world, that to avoid snow, planned on seasons, because I thought with my vision, my lack of depth perception, I could never navigate in snow again. I knew I wouldn't be skiing, or I thought I would never be skiing, never mind where my trail has gone. But that first year, I thought, 13 massives, then I'll have life figured out.
Just 13.
That should do it.
That's all.
Yeah.
Lucky number.
And so that first year, by autumn, I was in the Himalayas, and I knew I've developed
so you weren't just going on hikes. You were going
I was thinking
to the Himalayas.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I was going hike, like, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about this perspective.
It's not the rock. It's not Bragg Creek.
Just some context.
So that first year, because so essentially, like from the time of the accident and talking about like being so incredibly frail and in a wheelchair, and then moving to walking, and my walking, just like for the average person, if you cover one eye, you're a little bit off center. Walking isn't quite normal. And so adjusting to that, like I had the airplane arms and for a long time. So basically like the wheelchair to walking to hiking, which is what I thought I would be doing that first year. But then with time and a little bit of open-mindedness, perhaps, hope, courage, I started moving faster, started building confidence, trust in my feet. There was a lot of falls. There's scars, the scars my knees and my hands could tell in themselves could be its own novel. And broken sunglasses, not because they fell when I fell, but I was so furious. If I would trip over a rock or a root, the anger, like the frustration, and I would step on, they would fall maybe, or I would take them off and I would like step on them. I was just so angry. And so, but eventually I went through the Himalayas and got connected with the trail running community. And so I had less than 10 months out of hospital, I was actually running in my first ultra marathon in the mountains.
Wow.
And I thought a friend actually had joined me at the time, and he wanted to race, and I said, like, I'll be your aid station manager. I'm your crew. I'm your person. He's like, what's the harm in trying? And then I get in my head, what's the harm in trying? And so getting myself to the start line or to get registered was like a win.
Yeah. Okay.
Then getting to the start line. And it started at 4 a.m. So that means getting up at 2:30 to get to the middle of where the race, nowhere. Anyway, for me and my vision, darkness is not my friend. And so that was a fear in itself. But then when the story I told myself was it's at least it's starting in the dark because I have the sunrise to look forward to. And so I hung on to that. Basically, I chased the sunrise.
Found little things to hope for again.
Little things. And it was like little things. Okay, the sun's coming up.
Did you know that that's what you were doing? Or was this just this, like, what I have to do to make today make sense?
I think the sunrise was I needed something. Like if it was going to be a race in the dark, I say not a chance I would have done it. Who knows? But yeah, little things. Okay, the 25K mark, look at what you're doing. And the strength that I found, like in those climbing tends to be my strength, the uphill. And it has before the accident and even now. But just like something shifted during that race where I was starting to see like maybe a little bit of serendipity in the story. Maybe there is components of a fairy tale in here.
You're starting to make meaning.
Starting. Disbelief. So I knew after that I wanted to come back to the Himalayas. I continued for that year, but then after the 13 countries, going back to Colorado to thank those doctors and the nurses assistants, the therapists, then choosing to go back to Nepal. I hadn't had life quite figured out, but I thought the Himalayas were the next step. So a year ago this month, I came from Nepal and I had spent the next 5 years. And that running, the higher I decided to go in the Himalayas, the more my trail started to intersect with climbers. And they were intrigued with what I was doing. This foreign woman by herself doesn't seem to see very well. But I was like, you live in these mountains, like the rustic, the Sherpa life, the culture, the Buddhism, like just so much intrigue. I wanted to learn and learn, and they wanted to learn and learn about me. And then suddenly our curiosity for each other just meshed my trail running community with the climbing community. And within the next year, I was over 5,000 meters and then intrigued, how about 6,000 meters? And so I just kept getting higher and higher, which now, listening to stories about Peak Week and it's actually not about the height of the mountains. You know, it's what happens during the climb and what you find out about yourself and what inspires you to climb higher or to climb differently or to pivot. So, I mean, I could keep going about the story.
Back up a little bit
Sure.
in terms of, I'm really curious about that anger piece, because not only have I experienced it, but it's like when you're in the dark nights of the soul and there is no light and there is no hope. Did you know what you were angry at? Was it your circumstances? Was it yourself? Was it the higher power? Was it a thing specifically, or was it just frustration with the reality that you were facing?
You know, we often hear of the cycle of acceptance or like a line, and there was nothing secular, nothing linear at all. The darkness, I talk about it like relatively, one day it just came to me. It was like I was stuck in the life's darkest crevasse, like, and could not get out. And it's only because of the people that I'm doing this, like belaying, like getting me out. Because I think at first it was for sure disbelief, like, and then denial, like this cannot be happening. With a brain injury and like so many physical injuries or illnesses that we can actually see, despite the fact that like clearly there was something happening, like my face was black and blue and my eye was this big, like it was as big as the ball that hit me. But that your brain is bleeding and swelling, like they've got this wrong. Like I'm literally in the hospital like furious because I think that these doctors, they're using MRI, like modern technology, but I just could not believe that this was happening to me. I'm like you said, some people may say I'm like young, single woman, traveling the world, teaching overseas. She's a phys ed teacher. She's an athlete, like everything. In the fraction of a second, it was all gone. Like this is, I was going to use this, I don't know if we swear on this, but like this is not happening. Like this cannot be real. And so disbelief, denial, and then the anger. Like when like 2 more weeks and then your eye's going to get better. 2 more weeks. Like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. Like, this is my life. Like, I need to do this and this and this. And suddenly you realize, what do you really need to be? Like, I was training for this race. I have to do the race. Well, you know, I have to make sure that I'm back there. The students have a cross-country race next week. You know what? The school's not going to fall apart if you're not there. You need to take care of your health first. And you can't, help anyone if you're not taking care of yourself. So the denial, the anger, the frustration, and then it's not like simply moving towards acceptance, because you have days, and I still have them. This week's been incredibly hard for a number of reasons connected back to the mountains, but we slip, and that's where I have found the power in community and connection and the power of sharing my story. Because when I share my story, I realize that it might not look like brain injury or vision loss, but it might look like losing a job, relationship problems, alcoholism, cancer, whatever everybody has their own adversity. Everybody has their mountains to climb. And so, when I have found the strength and shifted my perspective from keeping it all within to opening up just a little bit, because one person's polite curiosity gave me a nudge to see from all those losses, like the 70% loss, to what I've actually gained and what I can gain from sharing my story. I can help other people. And through this incredibly surreal story, I found my purpose.
Yeah, there it is.
My purpose, for so long, like the existential question of that neurologist, like, what do you think your purpose is? And I'm like, that is crap. Like, what do you even mean? Like, I remember that again, like I was looking down, like this camera, like, are you kidding me? Like, how could you ask me that? Like, I'm literally dying. But, my purpose is to share this story from life's darkest crevasse to where I have chosen, after time, I've chosen my response and made choices that have led me here, sharing my story and connecting us. But But even earlier this week, being invited into a local high school, talking about sharing stories and just the connections. You would love, I was in the classroom, first student that walked in, probably 15-year-old boy. I know you.
Oh.
I'm like, set the tone. Because he heard my story. He didn't know I was coming to be the guest, but he had been at the Bow Valley Film Tour.
Wow.
And like, it was like he felt a connection to me because of the story previously. But then it was like his two buddies. It was like, I know her, like listen to this, watch this. And I was like, dang, like this is the reason I'm here. They might have come to class thinking, oh, we have to do this project, blah, blah, blah. We have a guest speaker. But because I had shared my story and they made that connection, and then I feel like sharing my story I was brought in as part of their curriculum, but, I think they learned so much more just about the power of stories than the ticking the curriculum boxes.
That's the goal, and that should be the goal of all of education, is to not just get them to check the box, but to actually help them become who they're supposed to be. And story, for time immemorial, has been the way that we do that as people.
Yes, and I think, like, hearing you say that, Chris, I think back to being a teacher in a classroom where even, like, I was a phys ed teacher, which I feel is such an important part of the curriculum, but where, the math teacher say, oh, Will never pays attention in class, or the science teacher saying he's always like goofing off. But, my message to them, even at that time, was how are you connecting to them? Like, can we bring in basketball into math class? Like, let's talk about, the point system or the physics for science class of basketball to create a connection. You're going to have Will's attention in class if you're talking basketball and science, or if you're talking basketball and math.
Yeah, you have to bring it
Connection.
into not just create a story out of it, but to actually connect to their story, so that they now see that perspective. One of the outcomes that we measure and have seen for over 20 years in the research is the commitment to learning that increases by starting to now see that this education is part of my journey. This is my training to become the hero that I aspire to be.
Yeah.
But so often we're not doing that. And we have kids who are suffering from a lack of hope. We see all these symptoms of it, mental health, addictions, et cetera,
The apathy, like.
right?
Yeah, that's frightening.
Yeah. And, oh, hey, Will, like, I played basketball on the weekend. That kind of thing. When you share a little story of the teacher's human too. I know in the Impact Society, some of the podcasts that I've watched, like talking, like connecting with students at their level. It's not the teacher knows everything and is right, but I'm coming from the weekend, having climbed, a couple of peaks, and, just, it's so much more than the curriculum.
Rob, what's going through your mind right now?
I'm just soaking this all up. I got a million questions and a million things to add, but I'm just letting you guys talk. I guess the thing I've been thinking about the last few days in preparation for this is why, maybe this is the psychology of it, I don't know what this is, I'm not an academic. Why do we as humans need to get thrown into the fire to find our purpose? Is that just the way it seems to be? I mean, would you have found that? Would I have found my purpose without what I went through? Would you have? I don't think I would have, but that's just always, we need to be scorched in the fire to find our way. It's almost like masochistic. I don't know, but I don't need to know the why.
It's a good question, and I'd love to hear your take on it as well, Jill. But from one of my hopes, and we shared this, I think, on our episode with Jordan Rempel, is we want our kids to be as or more resilient than we are, but without the same trauma that we had to go through. And you do see this, but post-traumatic growth is rare. Post-traumatic stress, learned helplessness, especially when you're going through what you went through, where the goalpost kept getting moved and the rug kept getting pulled from under you, so often, most of the time, results in learned helplessness, a loss of hope, and acceptance, but the wrong form of acceptance. Like, this is it for me. This is as good as it gets, and I'm now a circumstance with a label, and all my fears have come to be.
To fruition,
right? So this experience that the three of us have had, going through those dark nights, those challenges, those life-threatening and life-altering circumstances, do not always get turned into a hero story. More often than not, they turn into a tragedy.
Right.
But where resilience plays a key, and kind of coming back to that question that you had there, Rob, is it can be done before the risk. It can be done before that circumstance, that label, and that fear become a life story. And that's really our mission, is to be able to find these stories like yours, Jill, and to communicate them through education, to help teachers bring them into the classroom, not just the story, but also that ability to bring meaning making and story shaping into every class. I love that you talk about math. I want to do heroes trigonometry one day. It was my most difficult course. I did math 10 3 times, failed it each time, and to do it later. But like, if we're able to help engage that sense of being, of who I am and why I'm here and where I'm going, not only can they suffer through trig, they can climb mountains after losing everything. So do you have to go through that? I hope no one has to go through that. And less people will have to go through those things, or will be more likely to be able to surmount those obstacles as they're going through them, if we get there early and often with these types of supports, not just supports to address mental health issues, but to be preemptive and get there at the beginning of their story, so they can see that you will face circumstances, some of them life-altering. But those can be walls that define you, or they can be stepping stones to build your strengths and make you the person that you're supposed to be.
And I think that's, for me, what comes to mind listening to that, like the stepping stones, is the where choice comes in. Like, are you hitting the wall, or are you choosing one more step, or are you choosing a different direction? Maybe trigonometry is not my strength, but choosing something that does inspire me to keep climbing my mountains.
Yeah. What was your experience with that, Rob? Like, I know that you went through some dark days as well, and struggled with addictions and all sorts of things that we've gone through in your podcast. And if you want to hear the whole story, listen to that show. But from your perspective, how did those circumstances, how were you able to turn those circumstances from this is who I am and this is as good as it gets, to no, this is that circumstance that I need to address, and I need to go through it in order to become better?
Well, as cliche as this might sound, it all happened in nature. It's just motion, getting up every Saturday morning and going and climbing a mountain, winter or summer. Not a Himalayan peak,
That's okay. No
not a Himalayan
comparison.
peak, but that's coming. But it's just that process, that motion, that exercise. That's what worked for me, and then it led to a whole bunch of other things. But when I'm on the mountain in whatever capacity, my life and my problems tend to shrink, and I'm out of the human-made world. So it's just me and my suck of water and my noodle in here, and things started to make sense. And the conversations I had made a mentor in the mountains, a mountain person. It's just the conversations. That conversation started, and all the things that had been stuffed down deep inside me to my ankles started to kind of come up. That's how it worked for me. It sounds simple. It sounds, where is it, this serendipity? I don't know. It just started to happen. It was the consistency of every week for 5 years climbing a mountain on Saturday or Sunday.
I think there's something special about the mountain climbing experience. As a non-mountaineer,
Absolutely.
done a few hikes and can do more. What I love about it is that each time you go out to climb a new mountain, you're doing a micro hero's journey.
Absolutely.
You're going into the wilderness, into the unknown. You think you know where you're going, but you often get stuck and lost, and you have to depend on the wisdom and support of others. And it's not just getting to the top, it's now coming back and having a story, an experience to share with others. And I see every chapter of Heroes like that, but also there's something about going out and doing something that is not just building your physical muscles, but it's building those mental muscles. It's building that resilience. If I can do that thing that day, well, this challenge, I know how to face other mountains, metaphorical or literal.
Yes.
What came up for me there, like, no matter which mountain you're on, like the things that are out of our control, like the elements, and it is coming back down. Coming back down for me is harder. Once we get to the summit, it's not like everything is not
Done,
over. But when things are out of control, like we climb in a team. we need to reach out for support. But also, coming back to, I think, what you said, like, it doesn't matter if it's the Rockies or the Himalayas, whatever mountain. When you think, I'm in my mind, I'm thinking of one particular photo I used in the video where it's me, and as far as two healthy or eyes or little eyesight that I have, like, I am one of 8 billion people, like, on this planet. And when we think about, you mentioned earlier you said something yesterday about, like, when we're in the city and the chaos, and first world problems. But then when you think about how small we are, like, even here in the Rockies, like, what is really important, and just the answers or the calm that I find within when I am in nature and reminded of that perspective. Does it really matter that I look different than what society tells me?
Not at all.
Absolutely
No, it's
not.
It's way removed.
No, it's so far removed.
Attitude.
And I'm able to connect with that so much easier in nature. I think just coming back to perspective, both literally and figuratively, like how small we are and how insignificant the things that we worry about can be, and where we should focus our attention and focus on our mental health as well as our physical health. They both thrive in the mountains. Like, they both are such an integral part. Like, the higher, more technical climbing, like, you need both just as strong, if not more strong mentally.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, you climbed some of the biggest peaks in the world, K2.
K2
included. How was that circumstance? Right, you chose to go there.
I chose there. Yeah.
Why did you choose that, and what was doing one of those? Like, you're one of 8 billion people in the world, but one of what? 100?
Hundreds, maybe. 120
that climb K2.
Yeah.
And
less
maybe
than that.
the only person who's 70% blind to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Maybe walk us through that experience as it kind of relates to the story that we find ourselves in, whether we're climbing K2 or dealing with a cancer scare or just
addiction or
meaninglessness or lack of hope.
Apathy.
I think for me, my traumatic brain injury has put so much into perspective that when things get hard on the mountain, whether I'm struggling physically or there's a storm coming in, we need to make decisions, need to make choices, that when I'm having a tough time up there, the wind is 100 kilometers an hour, it's minus 30, that's a choice. I'm choosing to be there. I didn't get to choose my vision loss. You didn't get to choose cancer or alcoholism. But when I put myself in a situation like climbing the world's hardest mountains, Annapurna was actually more difficult for me than K2. But I mean, doesn't sort of irrelevant. But when things were really tough, it was one foot in front of the other. It doesn't matter how fast you're going. Just keep going. And I say that like, yes, of course, safety first. You need to keep moving. But in less literally, like, just, you're choosing to be here. You've done much harder things. You've prepared for this. One foot in front of the other. Take your time and just, I think nothing has challenged me the way that traumatic brain injury has, like, in everything that came in its wake. So it's taught me strength that I would have never otherwise known. And so when people ask, like, well, would you change anything? Actually, no, I wouldn't. Like, I've learned so much about authenticity, about impermanence, about being vulnerable, about the power of choice. All of these things that I've learned couldn't be learned from a textbook, but through these life experiences. And that, I think just coming back to when things get tough in, this week, having a tough week mentally, tough on Annapurna when there's people missing, there's a storm coming in, I have pneumonia, all of these things, like, I have a choice, and how am I going to respond? at the top of your inhale, if you pause before you exhale, within that time, there's space. And in that space, there's room to make a choice.
I think we all just took a deep breath.
Yeah, I did too. So what else? So like you said, you had a tough week this week, and like I have days too where I'm basically in hiding under my covers all day, and it's sunny out, and like, what the hell's wrong with you? But how do
That was this week for me. It's been incredibly hard. This week is the anniversary of I lost my one of my closest friends in an avalanche last year, on October 7th. And just now, people literally last night, when I said I was awake at 2 a.m, friends are racing towards the summit on that same mountain. And so knowing her body is still up there somewhere. And it's been an incredibly hard year just to navigate that loss. No closure. And then, just this year of the broken bones and, life's thrown a lot at me, but again, I know I can work through it. And impermanence I always come back to that because I know the only thing constant is change. I'm not saying everything's going to get better tomorrow, but I know that it's not going to be like this forever. And that acronym about hope, like hold on, pain ends. Because for a long time I felt like I had no hope. But impermanence is something that I come back to every single day, let's say 98% of days since accident number 1. When in hospital, friends would put, like, Jill saw this doctor, or her headache was a 9 out of 10, or she's got this therapy. I eventually sort of became dependent on that. I couldn't remember things. I couldn't write properly. My headaches were so bad. I turned that into journaling. And just like you, I have over 40 journals, paper, pencil, until this past year when I realized if I'm going to write a book, it would have been much more efficient to have that all annotated digitally. But anyway, there's something powerful for me, paper and pencil. And journaling is something, so in the dark days like this challenging week, regardless of what day it is, I journal. But I start every day. So not if I'm depending on conditions, but the first thing I do every morning is I do some stretching. Some might call it yoga, I call it stretching, and then meditation, and then journaling. Before any connection, I don't turn on my phone, no connection to the world until I just feel like that sets myself up for whatever the day is going to bring. Like, center, how am I feeling? What am I looking forward to? Maybe what am I worried about? And then sometimes I do come back to that during the day. Right now, I feel connection and community are a huge part, and for me, I can easily go inward. It's so easy as humans to feel like we are alone. I've learned, I'm not, but some days it's incredibly hard, and for me, so the journaling, the exercise, nature. Therapy, like talking openly, like there is no shame, like about, and I encourage like therapists, and I'm so thankful that I have my own, but and reaching out, even sometimes it is hard, but also just to be kind and gentle with ourselves. Like I tend to be like my worst critic, and I talk to myself. I wouldn't talk to anybody the way I talk to myself at some points, but I think awareness is huge.
Yeah.
And when I catch myself, I know better, but it's not easy. But yeah, coming back to, I think the number one, the key, the value is that relationship I have with impermanence.
What I love about that, it's like there's no quick fix in what you just said. These are all habits, mindsets, these practices.
Maintenance.
That really, it's maintenance. Like you own a car, well, you need to get oil changes, you need to fill the gas, you need to change the brakes. But with ourselves, so often we get so caught up in the things outside of ourselves to maintain that we forget that without maintaining our own sense of purpose and our sense of wellness, we're kind of useless outside of it.
Sorry, go ahead, Rob. I've done way too much.
No. I've been meaning to ask you this. I know if this is related, maybe this will just be a segue question. I've been thinking about you a bit the last few days, and
Jeez.
well, no, just. That sounded, no, that's not weird. It's legitimate. Two spirits. Anyway, do you, not necessarily standing on the summit of K2, what do you see? Because I don't want to play on the vision thing. do you feel in nature, or not specifically on a summit, this sense of possibility? That's what I feel. That's what it does to me.
Yeah.
Now, standing on the summit, I see 600 summits. I'm going to climb. It's that too in a childish way, but the sense of awe and the sense of what's possible, that's what's got me going. Now, we're talking a Canadian peak. Now, again, not the comparison to the Himalayas, but when you're on a mountain, what do you feel? What does nature give you, or can you articulate that?
I think the two words that come to mind and tied right in with you is possibility and perspective. No matter which summit I'm standing, what mountain I'm climbing, and I don't even have to be on a summit, but if I'm ice climbing, like sometimes I'll just stop and think, like in that hospital, I could never imagine the turn that life was going to take. Like, you don't know. When I'm struggling, having a hard week, you don't know what's going to happen in 5 minutes. Like, I always use the word blueprints now, because if we plan, life doesn't happen that way. In the fraction of a second, we get news or something happens, and with blueprints, eraser, pencil, we can change, modify. We have ideas. But I think when I'm in these, in the moments, ice climbing, like leading something that I never would have thought possible, standing on the top of K2, where I can, like, there's nothing you can see except mountain, like the highest mountains in the world. Possibility and perspective, literally, like, again, how small I am, but possible. Like, I was given 3 days to live, and less than 10 years later, I'm one of, and I don't, yes, there's a number of records I don't know about, I don't care about, because that's not the reason I did it.
Right.
I turned to nature. I turned to that 1 year in mountains to be alone and figure out, in search of light on my trail, like in such darkness. And
That's the title of the book.
That's it right there. How is the book coming?
You know what? Since the Bow Valley Film Tour, I have been like this.
Okay.
This. All good stuff. But I need, I journal every day, but to actually focus on a writing project like the book, I need to be in the right headspace.
Yeah.
And I have a big article coming out with a well-known magazine right now that went from 5 pages to 20 pages. So I have lots of stuff going on, but
I'm not nagging. I'm encouraging. I want to help.
Make sure we link all that stuff and post so people who are listening can get inspired through your journey and follow your journey as you go. One thing that I'm just so excited to have met you and be building this friendship and have this conversation on is that you started as an educator.
Yeah.
And not only started, but you still are.
Yeah.
And you were in a school last week sharing your story and connecting with young people. And I'd like to hear your perspective as well, Rob, but in terms of like as a teacher to a student, say like a 13-year-old student, how do you take some of these experiences and make them relevant for what they're going through without them having to go and start climbing mountains every week
Climb K2
to get it? How do you see that happening within the classroom to help those young people to start to get it early and often on their journey?
I think 2 words that jump out at me are connection and passion. So these students, they were 10th graders, and they had this project that they needed to make a film about a day in their life, and their enthusiasm, like it was like they didn't think their life was important. I'm like, wait, like what are you doing and the choices that you're making during the day? And one girl mentioned basketball, and I just think, like, if that's what her passion is, like, let's try to what's the word, like, help her find her why, like, what is it about basketball that she likes? Is it actually playing basketball, or is it the community? Is it the connections? And as an educator, just help foster that. Being open-minded, a flexible mindset, just because not everybody can make the basketball team. Like, I remember getting cut in 9th grade basketball. I was devastated. Like, I don't belong, I'm not good enough, and all of these things. But, in retrospect, thank goodness I didn't make that basketball team, because it opened the door to running, which helped me train for skiing, which, Sometimes, just like my brain injury or just like my ice fall accident, like if this accident didn't happen, I wouldn't have ended up at the Bow Valley Film Tour because I would have been out climbing and not in the gym talking to Dan, the snowball effect. And so
perseverance has a lot to do with it, though.
Definitely.
So many times we get that no, and then we stop trying.
Sorry, thank you. Yes, that's where my thought was going.
Go for it.
You nailed it. Yeah,
Finishing sentences.
I lost my train of thought, but you picked it up. Yeah.
So
one door does not mean like there are so many. Yeah. So we need to, I think, as educators, and again, I'm not a classroom, but I think the choices that I make. Like, I hope those students in that classroom learned more in that hour and a half just about what is possible or perspective. Things to consider that, there is more than that basketball team, or just because, I can't be on the hockey team for whatever reason doesn't mean we can't try new things, being open-minded. And
I think there's this relationship that I'm hearing from this story, as well as so many of the stories that we share and the work that we do in classrooms, is around, what comes first, the perseverance or the hope. And they really do build on one another, but it has to start with some hope. Some hope that I can be better than I am today. Hope that I do have a purpose. I'm not just here meaninglessly living my life and breathing air, but there's something for me to do that is more important than just the here and now. And that, in turn, that hope for a better future, the hope for a better tomorrow, hope for just today, I'm going to see some light, encourages that perseverance, and that builds those muscles, those mental muscles, not just the literal ones. Rob, I'm curious what your thoughts are, just in terms of if you were to think about.
Go ahead, you got a
No,
thought.
I was going to ask you. Where do you feel that hope started to play a role in your story?
I was on the summit of my first 11,000er, which is a tall mountain in the Canadian Rockies that there's like 58 of them that we all want to climb. It's kind of a weird club, but it's really cool. And I was on my first one, and I was on the summit ridge of my first 11,000 Mount Athabasca. It's a walk up. It's, technically not intense, but you got to deal with the seracs, and we're on the ridge, and it's Yuri, my guide. I'm in the middle, and Yuri's behind me, and we're walking on this ridge, and it's like this, and it's snowing. It's death on either side. You're not going to fall, and that moment, that ridge walk, I sobbed like I had never sobbed in my life. Because a year ago, I had my suicide planned. I knew I was going to go in K Country. I had it all figured out. And the fact that I was there a year and to where I got to in 1 year gave me hope that I can do anything. And it's not the climbing of the mountain, it's where I was, how dark and how dark. It was just like snakes, and how it goes. It's depression had won, and I was defeated. And alcohol was just part of it. A year later, I'm climbing 11,000ers with crampons on my feet. And I'm like doing something I never thought I could ever do in my lifetime. I continue to do that now. That's when I felt hope, first time. I was so challenged physically and mentally and emotionally. Then I realized I can do anything. Not anything, but I can do most things come at me. Anything, hard or easy, I can do it. And I have a group of people around me, but I can do it. I'm strong. I'm not weak. I'm not broken. I'm not addicted. I'm strong. I'm power. I can do it. And that was the turning point there. And and Yuri's like, "What's wrong with you?" And I'm just sobbing. And it was just the joy, the release. I mean, the downs, I get down like this week and last, but I know it's not going to last. It's a storm. It's a crying baby. I have to be gentle with it. And
it's like you didn't just get a new perspective or like have a take on a new perspective, but you really were that new perspective.
And being on a summit is just part of the symbolism, but it could have been anywhere along the way, but that did happen to hit me in that moment. That this is like the rest of my life is going to be really exciting, and I want to help, and I want to help other people feel this. Feel that. Because don't give up. Like, I have meaning. The world is better because I'm alive. And I'm not tooting my own horn. The world is definitely better that Jill's with us. That the baseball didn't take her out. How she's inspired me, how you inspire me in the conversations that we have. That's what I would have missed out on. I'd be in K Country, been eaten by ticks. So hope, that there's so much possibility. It's infinite.
I'm curious, when you were in your darkest
days,
struggle, something motivated you to take that first step out the door.
It was
Yuri?
my son's love, and it's as cheesy as that sounds. It's just unconditional love.
That's it.
Do you think he realized his part in your story? Yeah.
I think so. I think because of the way I was in his childhood, he grew up faster and he developed maybe maturity quicker than other kids did. It's just through adversity, getting hit with a line drive, things change. I don't know. And I sometimes I even ask that. Like, is he an old soul? Like, I don't get it. I'm lucky.
Has he been part of the Impact Society directly?
Just really,
Peak Week.
he's kind of he's the brains. He's the brains behind Peak Week.
Okay.
Like day 2 this year, I'm stuck. I can't find the mountain. I called in Montreal. We're trying to find Chris, and he sorts us all out and gets us to the trailhead. Like, he's the kind of the heart and soul of it.
He's a very young Gandalf.
But he has this mountain wisdom that's very natural and very, very authentic. So I don't know. Yeah, he does, and I've thanked him many times. But there's something special going on there. So like, he's inspired me to do that for others, and it doesn't cost me any money. It's unconditional love costs and compliments and support and community, and it's just opened all these doors from this little young man.
I think perspective is huge, and I think that wisdom, it really comes with a lot of perspective. Of he's not trying to change his dad; he's trying to love his dad and bring his dad into the things that he loves. It's something that we all love to do, whether it's with our kids or as a teacher with our students, is I love this. The day you went out there, it was cold or it was cloudy. And you're like, no, I want to play some baseball with these kids and get out there.
Yeah.
And we want to share our journeys.
Yes, yeah. And I think if people often make jokes or tease me a little bit about I get animated. I'm like, well, that's because I have passion.
Yes.
And that's exactly it. Those students, like, different than the math teacher or the science teacher, I'm not saying that they didn't have passion for their subject, but if you're speaking about something that you are truly invested in, you're going to feel that. The people around you, those students, I have zero doubt that every one of those students was excited to come to PE class. Athlete, that, like, no labels. Like, we're just here to have fun, to move our bodies, to be outside in nature. And passion is contagious.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful that I have that and I can share it with others. And now through my story. Yeah.
And I love, because passion is so much more pure than just, you have a purpose and like, just live for that. It's like, things get hard. Things happen. This is what we talk about. Beginning of Heroes is in life, stuff happens. You have all these great gifts. You have all these great strengths. You are beautiful humans from the get-go. But in life, things happen. So it's not just to have a hope that things can get better. It's to have the wisdom to know that it's not going to be that easy.
Yeah. And the tools when they don't, like when things do get hard. And I believe that that's, part of your purpose with the Impact Society. Like, where can we turn when I'm tempted to go to the bottle or, or
crawl under a rock and
exactly, like, I can't get out of
I'm
bed.
not motivated to study for that test.
I don't want to go to school today.
Here.
Yes. Yeah.
I think that's the number one thing, that a lot of students don't take those harder courses in high school because they don't know why they're there.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this?
If I fail, I'm going to fail. Like, I'm not smart.
Yeah.
Wait a
but
second.
then when you insert connection into it, and they're now connected to that thing, it's now no longer just I don't know why I would go down this path. It's, by going and pursuing this next peak, this new difficulty level that I'm encountering, being invited into.
Yeah.
When I have that connection, it's no longer a useless path. It's now an opportunity to build myself into the person I want to be.
Yeah. I'm thinking about experiential learning and how the mountains play into that.
Oh, yeah.
And just getting kids outside and, taking the physics lesson or the science lesson outside or into nature, and how I feel learning can be so much more, or teaching and learning can be so much more authentic. In fact, we don't need to go into this, but I actually did my master's thesis on
go on. Yes, get into it too.
Here we go.
I don't want to start talking about standardized testing, but I have I have a hard time with standardized testing. And you can show me, what you know about podcasting in so many different ways than like a paper and pencil test. Like, if you I've been on, I don't even know, 20 podcasts. And I could tell you all about them, but if you ask me to like write a test about, what you do in this situation and when this happened, I have no idea. But let me talk to you, or let me explain, let me show you, I guarantee like I'm going to pass that test. And we need to give students the opportunity to show the ways that they learn, but also we need to create opportunities, because we don't all learn by paper and pencil.
No.
And again, I could go off like on tangent and passion.
When you do that, like it's the feeling, thought, behavior, conviction. It's just how we learn and develop bad habits and good habits, and you form them all together, and that becomes personality and identity. But really, it's something very simple, and you start to have those feelings about something and think about it, and you have the opportunity to throw it out into the world and try it out. The more that comes back positively, the more likely it is to now become a lifelong habit. It has less to do with your aptitude and has everything to do with your attitude. It's not your IQ that gets you passionate about something.
No.
It's your passion that builds your ability to do something. And this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is why we're having this podcast. I don't have a checklist of things that we have to get through. I'm taking some notes here and there. We've talked through this, but at the end of the day, it's about how do we connect these stories in a way that someone who's listening has a little more hope to go into that classroom or have that conversation for themselves or for the person they're trying to help in their life. That's why we share the stories that we share, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What's next? What's next
I'm
for
so
Jill?
connecting to so much. I'm so connecting with the students, with the teachers. Like, how can I help by, if it's sharing my story or talking about the choices that I have made to help me find light and to find hope. Some may call me a hero. Like, how can I be a hero within the Impact Society and actually make an impact? So I hope by being here today, this is a starting point.
So I feel like you just flipped the question back to
How you like those apples, Scott?
Number one, a hero is someone who uses their gifts and abilities to build themselves and inspire others. And you are 100% a hero in so many ways, and have been even before you went through such a difficult journey. To have to rebuild yourself makes you a superhero.
Twice.
Technical definition of
Twice.
it. That said, like, I think about the perspective piece here, and that every chapter of every program we create, it's not only experiential, but it starts with a story, because it's those stories, by sharing our story, that we actually plant that seed of hope. Especially these stories that are redemptive in nature, that are a person who has lost it all, or was facing insurmountable odds, and was able to, through their own personal strengths and their external strengths, those people, those doctors asking those provocative questions, like, what's your purpose? I can just imagine this German doctor, what is your purpose?
Yes.
I would get mad too.
Oh, I was so angry.
Look out.
But it's by sharing these stories that that the young person can think about the perspective that they're in now. It's like, I don't need to be a victim of my circumstances. If she can, so can I. Chapter 1 of Heroes. The story in it is an addict to Ironman, and it's a lady who was suffering from addiction and homelessness and started running. And today she's like 15, 20 years sober and runs a charity that does marathons for addicts to help them in their recovery journey.
Awesome.
So it really is that simple, but also how can we do more of it and really help cement it? And this is where I love Peak Week and Peak experiences, because so often we're always looking, when we're building our stories, what are those TSN turning points? Where did that happen? Maybe not a moment in time, it may have been weeks or months to gain perspective, but to be able to use those as ways to inspire that student, and then to give them an opportunity to not just hear it and be inspired by it and go about their day, but to do what you do every day, is to journal about it. To first get to really understand, what was it that person was facing? How difficult must it have felt? What did they do? What were their actions? What were their feelings and thoughts? And then behaviors. And then what's their long-term conviction? These are people who have gone through the toughest stuff imaginable. And for you to be going into schools already, I'm just like, let's compare notes, and let's make sure that there's not just the peak experience or the hype at the beginning. Here's a story, here's a great story, but then now here's a program that's going to help you develop your story. But further to that, I can't help but think, especially here in Alberta, where outside of our doors, an opportunity to have that mini hero's adventure and to get into the mountains. Something, Rob, maybe you want to share a little bit more about how we want to help create these peak days to cement the hero's journey for the students.
Yeah, I'd really like to get kids out in experiencing what I'm experiencing, what you experience, just for a day here and there, just to start to plant that seed, the healing power of nature. It's infinite. So you have to dial into it, and you have to buy into it, and you got to spend the time. But I would love to do that. Get kids out and just like maybe because we're all locked in the human-made world, and it's really destructive. Cities are like disease. I mean, I'm going on a weird tangent, but we need to get away from all that. Phone in the car, camera in the car. Just get out there and smell and hear and listen and feel and listen to your own heart and soul. I mean, I'm going to the ultimate degree, but even just take a group of kids out and experience what I experienced skiing as a kid, or because I didn't make the hockey team, and that's where it all started, getting away from my family and being in the mountains, spending the day. I could come back and my parents would still be arguing and I wouldn't even care. To me, it's nature. Is the catalyst, and Jill talks about it often. She spends most of her time in nature. Well, look at the results, and despite what she's been through, to me, that is one of the keys, and I really want to help formalize that and build the code and be able to do that with us.
What I love about this, and like we talk so much about your mountain, climbing that mountain, and you use these wonderful metaphors that Miley Cyrus song Climb is definitely one of our like anthems, or at least one of my anthems when it comes to the work that we do and the why that I have in my own life. But something that cements a good metaphor into like self-actualization is actually the literal thing. This is what I'm excited about, is to help young people to, yes, connect with nature. And I love the passion about that, but just by doing it, you've now climbed a mountain.
You're standing on the summit.
You've done that hero's journey in a 10-hour day or an 8-hour day, however long it took, but you summited, you got to that peak. Now relate that experience to the metaphorical mountains that you're going to be facing for the rest of your life, because we will. So it's really preparing them for that as early and as often as possible through our stories, but then not just inspiring them up, but then helping them work their way down and into their own.
Climbing the mountains of their mind, Jill?
Yes, that's
so
right.
I can ask you a question that's related to that.
Go for it.
Sure.
So how are you in climbing the mountains of your mind, if you don't mind me boring your metaphor? How is that? It's continual ups and downs and valleys and coals and couloirs and.
I think it comes back to that impermanence. When the time or the climb gets tough, when it gets super steep or it's prolonged, it feels like it's going on for hours. When the wind is coming in or the snow is dumping relentless for days, it's not going to be like this forever. It's that coming back to the only thing constant is change. Like, I'm going to keep climbing. It's probably going to be hard for a couple more days, maybe the next couple of months, if there's something happening in family life or in work or relationships. There's it's going to change, but I'm going to work through it. So I know I've said this a few times, but just that which is impermanence, just embracing it. And I just continue to make the most of whatever life hits me with or throws at me, making the most of the life I nearly lost. And I know some days are going to be dark, and this past week has really been tough. This past year has really been tough, and I have found good in it. There's so much, and I know, because of accident number one, that in it at the time I couldn't imagine anything good would come out of it. But I knew when it set me up for when I broke my leg and I shattered my ankle, that I knew this is going to be awful. But I also knew it's going to get better, and it's going to I'm going to have to work through this, but it's impermanent. It's going to change. And there's going to be, the good that has come out of it. Like, I started going to the gym more. I met Dan. I met different people from the gym. I met Sue because of Dan. And I've made connections that I wouldn't have otherwise made. And so finding the good, a handful of friends that I have just in the past, 8 months sort of since this happened, or the past year since I chose to stay in Canmore. The reason I chose to stay in Canmore is because I was feeling these connections where I could have deep, meaningful conversation in nature, but also just having that sense of connection and community that helps when the mountains of my mind get extremely tough, windy, dark. It's all going to change, but everything I need is within.
Absolutely. Everything.
When the mountains get tough, when the week is hard, when I want to bury myself, I know everything I truly need is within. What they say, what he's doing, what she said,
doesn't matter.
It's all, and I could get into the tangent about, the outside world and social media, and I need to do this or this. Yeah. The headlines, they're saying I quit, blah, blah, blah. No, everything, you're going to be just fine. Like, talk to yourself as if you were your bestest friend, and you're going to be okay. Yeah. When I hear that, I think of a video I've made, or the video that I used in the Bow Valley Film Tour, where I come out of hospital and I've taken photos of signs, like in the Swiss Alps, in the French Alps, in Nepal, in Andorra, where you're on a trailhead and there's like 7 different directions these arrow pointing. And when I think of getting dropped at Denver Hospital, no direction, no hope, no light, I didn't know what to do. I think of these signs and it was like, life, I don't know which one to take. And something within pointed me towards mountains. It was like all these literal places I could go, but within I needed to go in search of light, in search of, essentially, I wouldn't have said it at the time, but I think that was my search for hope, my search for something better, that I'm leaving the hospital, I don't know where to go, but I'm going to go spend some time with Mother Nature around the world. I chose Mother Nature because I wanted to be away from society. I wanted to be away from the shoulds. I should be doing this. I should be doing this, that. I should look like this. I should have that. I wanted none of it. But just, I think, choosing to go and be alone and try to find some light on the trail with the help of Mother Nature. I think, in retrospect, that was a little bit of sign of hope, that I did something deep within, had a belief that there was more for me, that there was something better. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I had enough of a flexible mindset, or maybe a little bit, my mind was open just a little bit about possibility.
I have an idea.
Help me.
This could be this is a chapter of Heroes that is not yet written, but could be easily written, with the whole idea of finding the light. When it's so dark, that's the hardest time. But the littlest piece of light, I think of it, even the yin yang symbol, there's that dark part. Well, even in there, there's still something. There's still something to be found. And I think about the journey I've been going through with my son, who's been diagnosed with cancer, and we haven't lost hope. Not just because we're going to continue to hope and we're persevering and we're resilient and all those things, but it's every day in every way looking for those specks of light. And once you find them, holding on to them, because as you hold on to them, you really focus on them, all of a sudden it can be as dark can be, but that one little hole, now all of a sudden that's all you see is the light.
Yes.
And I think that's the exercise. That's the experiential learning, is maybe literally finding some light, but then going back and journaling about the dark days that you've had and finding the light in there. It's the hope chapter.
Absolutely. The one thing that comes to mind with like the tiniest thing and how we can make an impact. For me, when I was doing that journaling, that first time through the Himalayas, with my notebook like this, my headlamp in the dark, just writing, not talking to anybody. But because who's now become a friend, Mael, came up to me and he's like, "What are you doing?" Like, he saw me every morning on this trail, but his polite curiosity, but that was that little speck of light. I didn't realize that at the time, but it was like, he showed interest. He was legitimately curious about what I was doing, and something about his approach, it was like, oh, somebody does care. Maybe if I do share a little bit, and that's how it evolved, about me actually starting to share my story and start my website and write in magazines, was because just the tiniest little thing that, it could be a comment that somebody makes to you when you're having a rough morning or you're in the coffee shop and nobody's smiling, but then somebody says, well, the smallest little thing can make the most powerful difference.
That's Yuri.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
No, that's
yeah.
it.
Tiny littlest things can make such a big difference.
And that's the story. And that's, I think, what you're already doing. And as we continue to move forward in our mission to help young people early and often to not just prevent risk, but to help them live lives of confidence, character, integrity, and a purpose. That meaning making, actually one of the smallest things we can do to help make meaning of our own lives, even the toughest of times, is to find that little shred of light. And not to just have it and hold it, but then to be able to share it. This was a person who came into your life and showed you there's a little glimpse.
Yeah.
Same with you, same with me.
And it gets passed
And
on.
as we do that as a habit, we suddenly become more resilient and actually we find our purpose. It finds us. And I love, this could be in science class, because the goofy way light works is it wants to be found, right?
Yeah.
When you're not looking at it, it's a wave. When you are looking at it, it's a particle. That's pretty cool. When you think about the metaphor we're dealing with here, is when you're actually focusing on it, now it becomes precise. But if you're not focusing on it, it's working all around you, hoping to be seen.
Hoping to be seen. Interesting. Yeah.
Or there to be seen. Not sure if it's conscious or not, but it's a pretty cool metaphor.
Very cool.
Well, Rob and Jill, actually, I'll ask you for some final thoughts. And what would you say about this conversation? How would you summarize it in 10 words or a paragraph?
Go ahead, Rob.
No, ask Jill first.
Okay, go for it.
One sentence?
Yeah, they're going to be tough.
The impact we can make by sharing stories is so profound. I'm just thinking again that the picture of me climbing Amadablam, it's a 7,000 meter peak, and it's just me in the Himalayas. I'm small, tiny among those mountains, tiny among the world population, but the choices that I make, the choices that I am making to share my story from that dark crevasse to that peak can make an impact that I will never know the impact of.
It's a ripple. Cool. Roberto.
It's tough to follow that up.
How are you feeling?
Kind of overwhelmed with all this sharing. It's really incredible.
This is Impact Society. It's about, one of the former catchphrases back in the 90s was inspired people, inspiring others. And truly, that's the mission. We have a big mission, a big goal is to positively impact 1 million youth by 2030. It's going to 1 million youth a year after that. But it's not the number that matters. This is what matters. The sharing of the story and inviting other people to be a part of it and to shape their own as a result. So I'm full of gratitude right now in terms of just having another opportunity to meet a hero, someone who is out there not just doing it for themselves, but doing it in a way that is passing that light on to the next generation.
I'm thankful I found my purpose and that I can be here.
Yeah.
Me too.
That's the goal, for every kid to feel that, to know that, and for teachers to know how to show that.
I'm happy to help.
Yeah, awesome.
Me too. Absolutely. Climbing some more mountains next year.
Peak Week 2025.
2025. I got some big ideas. I'll talk to Jill later.
Maybe the Himalayas.
Or Africa. Something about Africa. I want to go back to Africa. I haven't talked about that yet today, but you always got to return to Africa. Have you climbed a mountain in Africa yet?
I have.
Oh, Gilly?
Yeah.
Oh, she's already done that. What about Mount Kenya?
I haven't. I've seen it, but I haven't.
There's a good one. There's the seed.
Well,
2025.
we got it on the list, and what I love about Peak Week is, yes, it's an annual excursion and fundraising opportunity to climb 7 peaks in 7 days, but the spin-offs
so
are
much more.
only limited by the amount of peaks that we find.
Right.
Yeah, which is limitless, ultimately.
Absolutely. Well, thank you both for taking the time, not just to be here, but to journey through the last few weeks to prepare for this amazing conversation and to connect with an audience that who knows how these words and these stories will be shaped and used to inspire others.
I'm absolutely honored and thankful to be part of this. I look forward to more.
Appreciate you. Awesome.
It's a privilege. It's a privilege. Always, Chris.